All right, this is tape number 11, and we're going to be talking today about weapons of mass destruction. WMD, weapons of mass destruction. And this is one of those things where you have to think tragically. You think about the use of things in a negative way designed to kill people. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. So there are 4 types of weapons of mass destruction. Number 1 is chemical. Number 2 is biological. Number 3 is nuclear. And number 4, it's the newest one, computer. Okay, so these are the 4 types of weapons of mass destruction. And the reality is that the United States is deeply concerned about these types of weapons. It is trying to limit the spread of these nuclear weapons for the most part. And at the same time, the United States is, well, more correctly, has a strategy, a military strategy that uses computers and that uses nuclear weapons. So we no longer have those in our arsenal, and because we have decided that that is immoral to do, but we continue to have these that are available. And the reality is that when we talk about election interference from the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, what we're talking about is using computers as weapons of mass destruction. It's just using them to disseminate information in a negative way about a candidate. That is part of how they're playing the 2020 election, is the use of computers as a weapon. So, anytime you use computers as a weapon, of course, you raise questions about, is it appropriate to respond by using computers back? So, I just want to get into these a little bit more detail, introduce you to a couple of terms that you might not have heard of, and we'll take it from there. Okay? So, the first one is chemical weapons. And let's make sure I've got my notes here. There are several kinds of chemical weapons. There are what are called blood agents, and there are blister agents. There are nerve agents. They're called that because they affect your nerves, and it's often called nerve gas. And then there's a couple of other things, VX, which is particularly deadly, and something called Novichok, which was recently used. Okay, basically, when we talk about chemical weapons, what we're talking about is the use of weapons in such a way to interfere with your body's functioning. And blood agents are simply those that target the blood. A blister agent causes blisters. Nerve gas affects your nerves. And I'll get into these last 2 in just a minute. Okay, so what we've got is, in the world, we have a history of using chemical weapons in World War I. The Germans, the French, the British hurled weapons, chemical weapons, at each other because they were deep in the trenches, and it was just one way to try to kill the other side. Since then, there's been treaties that have banned the use of chemical weapons. The United States has burned up most, if not all, of its supply of weapons. Some countries still maintain stocks of them. My understanding is the United States doesn't anymore. Okay, what do you want to say about these things? Let me just give you a couple of names of these agents that you might have heard of. Sarin gas was used by a Japanese doomsday cult against Japanese people in the subway in the 1990s. Hundreds of people breathed in the sarin gas, and I don't remember how many people died. But it's a quick way to injure and kill people. Okay? Let's see. We'll get to the others. Oh, yeah. Another one that was used in World War I and recently used in Syria. My marker is stuck. It's called chlorine. And, I'm sure you've all heard of chlorine in pools. Well, guess what? Chlorine gas is a particularly deadly gas. And what happened is that Syria, in the country of Syria, they're engaged in a civil war right now. And the Syrian government decided that it would use chlorine gas as a way to control its people. So what they did was very simple. They flew planes over this city, which was filled with rebels against the Syrian government. They dropped bombs. The people, thinking that they were bombs, when they fell, they moved to the bottom, to the basement, the lowest place, so that they would be protected from the bombs coming, exploding above them. Okay? Well, guess what? Those bombs are filled with chlorine gas. Chlorine gas is heavier than air, so it settles downward. And as the people settled into the basements of the buildings to protect themselves from the bombs, the gas followed with them. And hundreds of people were killed and injured by chlorine gas. President Trump was so affected by the video of that the only real military action that he has authorized specifically was bombing the airbase where that chlorine gas came from. Chlorine gas is a particularly deadly thing, and Syria has used it. They're the most recent country that has used it. Okay, let me briefly talk about VX and Novichok. VX is a chemical agent that is no fun. It kills pretty quickly. Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, he wanted to kill his half-brother. So what happened is his half-brother was living in exile, basically a party guy. That's all he wanted to do. He was flying from one airport to another in Asia. And in one airport, he was greeted by two young women, scantily clad, who came up to him and spread their hands all over his face. And then the girls ran off. The ladies ran off. They went to the bathroom, washed their hands down. One of the girls threw up, but other than that, they were fine. Kim Jong-un's brother, this agent, this chemical agent over his face, knew immediately something was wrong. He ran. This is all caught on the video of the airport. He ran to the first aid station. Within 15 minutes, he was dead. What killed him was VX. And what happened is North Koreans had hired these two young women to put the VX on their hands, rub it on his face, and then they were instructed to run off and wash it off. They did not know that they were going to kill Kim Jong-un's brother. With what they did, they had no idea. But Kim Jong-un did. That's one of the ways he took care of his relative. He felt that his half-brother was a threat to his reign, so he had to get rid of him. Okay? Novichok is back in the news. Novichok was just used in the last couple of weeks. Vladimir Putin's principal opposition leader. He came along, and what did he do? He came along, and he was given it some tea to drink. And so he drank some tea and then got on a plane. So this guy just drinking some tea, didn't think anything special about it. And what happened is his insides rebelled. You can watch the video on YouTube. He got really, really sick. He is moaning really loud on the plane that he got on. They had to divert the plane, make an emergency landing, get him to the hospital. He was in a coma. He was moved just last week to Germany, and now he's been out of the coma. But Vladimir Putin wants to get rid of his enemies. He uses Novichok. He's used it before. There was a retired spy for Russia who, after he served Russia, moved to Great Britain, basically defected. And so one day he was walking home with his daughter, and they got to the front door. They touched the front door. The front door was covered with Novichok. Somehow it got on both of them. Both of them fell into a coma, and they were in the hospital for more than a month in a coma. They eventually recovered. A little while later, a couple was walking down the street, same house, walking down the street. They happened to touch the fence. The man and the woman in that couple got sick. The woman died. Okay? Novichok is quite a killer. All right? So, those are chemical weapons. And what I want to do is I'm going to stop the tape. This is tape 11A, and it's about chemical weapons. Our next tape is going to be tape 11B, and that'll be about biological weapons.